This podcast is part of the Podcast Arcade Network.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Paranormal Dads. I'm your co-host, Eddie.
I'm Pat.
I'm Andy.
And we welcome you to join us as we go in search of the monsters, myths, and mysteries that surround us. Thank you for joining us on Paranormal Dads. All right, episode 1, the beginning.
The beginning.
So, like we said, my name's Eddie, and this is Pat.
Hello.
And I'm Andy.
And we're going to give you a little bit of background on ourselves. That way, you kind of know why the heck are these guys doing this?
Is this like our origin story?
This is our origin story. Pat's parents were gunned down in an alley by Bigfoot.
That's right.
No, to give you some quick background on me, like I said, my name is Eddie, and I grew up all over this country, and a good chunk of my childhood was spent in upstate New York, where our house was literally backed by the Adirondack Mountains, and tons of forests, tons of just, your imagination goes wild in that kind of scenario, and I was just on fire with this type of idea that there was something else out there. There's this thing that no one else has seen, and so I'm speaking directly about Bigfoot. But as I got older, and as you start getting exposed to different things that are out there, just constantly curious about what might be going on behind the scenes, whether it's extraterrestrials, paranormal like spirits and ghosts, or Bigfoot. So just always very open-minded and keen to kind of experience that stuff in a way. So that's my angle where I'm coming from with this podcast. How about you, Pat?
Well, I'm probably kind of in the same boat. I grew up where every year we'd be going to Minnesota, spend some time out in the woods or around a lake. You're always kind of thinking about what could be out in those woods. A lot of the just the elements of being a child of the 70s, growing up, you're watching the $6 Million Man, and he's always facing these robots or aliens. Of course, his Bigfoot episode is just, one of the classics. So I've just always kind of been drawn to that sort of thing when it's on television. I was a big fan of the X-Files when it was on. It's just something that's always kind of appealed to me, and something I've always kind of had on my radar as I was growing up.
Yeah, and my this is Andy, and my journey all begins at my grandma's house. Growing up, she was really fostered my curiosity and the paranormal and mysteries and myths, and I just remember sitting in the what she called the den. It was just a spare bedroom of bookshelf after bookshelf of dusty hardcover books on UFOs and cryptids and paranormal things and space travel, and I was just hooked. And I grew up in North Omaha in a very old house that was fairly haunted, and so from a young age, I was witnessing and sensing and feeling kind of odd phenomena, and it never really scared me so much as intrigued me. And one thing led to another, and the paranormal and the metaphysical just kind of slowly started to grow from a interest to a passion, and then it overtook my life, and one thing led to another, and I started to give psychic readings and to do talks on the paranormal, and it just overtook my life. And so now it's not just a hobby, it's a profession. And it's kind of like when people ask a parent, well, which is your favorite kid? Well, you can't really pick one. You love them all equally. And I'm sitting here trying to rack my brain, which would be my quote-unquote favorite paranormal topic, and I don't think I could narrow it down. I like UFOs, I like Bigfoot, I like ghosts, I like haunted locations, and so it's all intriguing, and I think over the course of these episodes we'll probably cover all the bases, right?
That's the plan.
That's the plan.
A few ground rules, and I don't like the word rules per se, but just so you know as a listener where we're going with this is we're not going to necessarily we're not going to go through and try to overly prove something, nor are we going to try to debunk something. Right. We're going to share what we've experienced personally, what we maybe believe, and then also what we have read, and then our thoughts on that. And then we let you, the listener, decide on how you feel about the whole thing. So this is for fun, and I hope you all have fun as well. We're excited to do this, and also as Andy pointed out, we're buddies. We're also fans of the paranormal, but we're also dads.
We're also dads.
We are dads.
Probably dads first.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Dads first.
Better be.
But if you're looking for a scary journey, there's nothing trippier than parenthood, right?
If you change a diaper, you believe in the paranormal real quick.
That's right, yeah.
But so you'll see some of that get infused in, and some of the family stuff will come in for fun too, and you may even have kids come on the show and talk about some stuff too. So just have a fun time with us, and we're looking forward to bringing you some fun times. Now we'll move into recent sightings. And I think we're going to have Andy take this one over and talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Recent sightings is always going to be the first segment of our show. And so we'll talk about, stories that have occurred relatively recently. And it could be anything. It could be some ghost sightings, UFO sightings, Bigfoot spotted, Loch Ness Monster, anything that's going on around the world that's happened recently. It's kind of our way of catching you up to date on current events.
Half nude Eddie running through the neighborhood.
You're pretty hairy, man.
I know. It's a thing.
It's a thing. Just a Thursday night for you.
I saw a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Eddie. Size 10. Size 10.
You know what's funny? Random fact here while we're talking about recent sightings. Did you guys know that Wisconsin has more werewolf sightings than any other state?
I've heard that before.
It's so weird.
It's the cheese.
It's the cheese.
Why?
It's all the badgers.
Why?
They like to feed on badgers.
What? Wow, that is weird. Wisconsin.
Why Wisconsin? I have a theory. Now,
Okay,
nothing against people. I've been to Wisconsin. Super nice people. Just laid back people. But maybe they're a little bit furrier because it's a little bit further north and it's a little bit colder. So maybe all the excess body hair with the men up there keeps them warm in the winter.
Yes.
And B, they drink a lot of beer in Wisconsin to wash down the cheese.
There it is.
So there you go. Okay, a couple too many beers, and Uncle Larry goes streaking, and there you get a werewolf sighting.
Uncle Harry Larry goes out howling at the moon.
There you go.
Lit up on Wisconsin beer. I like the
theory.
theory.
Family in Wisconsin. I need to warn them.
Yeah,
guys,
them.
There's a disproportionate amount of werewolves out there.
That's right.
That is so interesting.
But as far as recent sightings that we're going to focus on today, and this is semi-recent, and we are going to omit the individual's name to protect confidentiality, but this is a 100% true story, and the setting for this actually takes place in, what would you call that, Northwest Omaha, I guess?
Yeah, I'd say
around the ballpark of Millard North High School.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And this is kind of a mutual friend of our group, real straight shooter kind of guy, very down to earth. And he actually relayed a story that had happened approximately 2 years ago. He and his wife at the time had a cat, and they were just lounging around on a weekend evening, and their cat was unusually agitated, hissing, spitting, growling at the back patio door with hair standing on end. So they go to the door, they flip on the back light that illuminated the backyard, and standing there was what they reported to be a 6-foot tall creature approximately, with glowing red eyes. And so the body sort of resembled a human for the most part, but the eyes were disproportionately large, almost like an owl, and they were glowing. And almost as if the creature knew that it was being watched, it raised one of its arms, outstretched from its body, and dangling from its arm was a wing with either fur or feathers. It was textured, so you could see it was a wing. and then the gosh darn thing just takes off and flies into the air. And this sounds impossible, but yet they, wholeheartely believed that what they saw was real. It was not an owl. It was not a case of mistaken identity. Granted, this creature was only 30, 40 feet from their door, so they got a pretty good view at it, and it flew off into the sky like it was a bird. Now, was it? Makes you think of the Mothman, right?
It's a very Mothman
from West Virginia.
Yeah.
Point Pleasant. Apparently, he tore down a bridge, or people claim that the Mothman was responsible for a bridge collapse back in the late '60s. I think it was.
Some say he was warning of it, maybe even like
foreshadowing the disaster.
So, but sounds like similar to a Mothman sighting.
Well, similar to a Mothman sighting, and I guess this kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. A little pop culture fun fact here, but if anyone listening is interested in uncovering more information about the Mothman, there's actually a movie that came out in the mid '90s or early 2000s, perhaps.
Yeah, early 2000s.
It was called the Mothman Prophecies. Richard Gere was in it. Really, really eerie movie based on true events. But the freakiest thing was, here in Omaha, this isn't ground zero for Mothman. We kind of catch wind of these stories, and that's the first time I've ever heard of a Mothman-type creature being sighted in the Omaha vicinity.
First time I've ever heard it, honestly. And like you said, the person who shared the story has nothing to gain and none of that.
Doesn't even want his name mentioned.
You're right.
So it's clearly not for publicity.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? What do you do when, and this is, I guess, a rhetorical question for everybody. What do you do when you see something that can't possibly be real and yet you see it with your own eyes?
You hide in the closet.
You hide in the closet. After you poop your pants or before?
While you can poop and run.
Yeah.
I think we've all, and maybe it's a big statement, I think a lot of us have had something, whether we've seen something, heard something, and yes, it's the classic line from, the Christmas Carol where it's like, you could be a spot of beef or a bit of undigested something or other. But the point is, the senses can fool you. But on the same token, we use them, all day long to get around our daily lives. So for the most part, they're fairly trustworthy, until you start having some sort of, breakdown of some sort. But, barring all of that, it's when you experience a thing that you have no real sense of being able to nail down. A lot of people just don't say anything, Hence this podcast.
When it comes to 6 foot tall things that can fly, you have ostriches, but they can't fly.
No.
You have, blue herons and cranes. They're 4 feet, maybe 5 feet tall.
Yeah.
But they have a, big, long, skinny neck. This thing had shoulders. It had a head, like a human. It had legs and a torso like a human. So I don't think it's a case of mistaken identity, and furthermore, they were very adamant that it was not it was not an owl. This wasn't a barn owl or a screech owl, because the creature was standing on solid ground. It wasn't like it was perched on a fence post or anything.
Right.
An owl, certain animals' eyes do glow. We've all seen like a deer on the side of the road, and whether they glow green or red, but it's usually because something's being bright is being reflected on them. They said that this glow is almost like an internal glow, like they were illuminated from within.
And you hear that a lot about Bigfoot as well, that a lot of people who claim to see Bigfoot say they had glowing eyes. And we'll talk about another creature coming up here who also, they said, had glowing red eyes.
That's a good segue right there.
Yeah, there you go.
Recent sightings. My goodness.
Recent sightings. And, that could be a never-ending subject, too, because, how far around the world do you want to go?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a couple years ago, semi-recent, but anyway, relevant to a lot of our listeners, and that happened in Omaha.
Oh, boy.
It's time for pop, culture, and the paranormal.
All right, this is the segment that we're going to be talking about the relationship between the paranormal and pop culture.
Yes.
Because that goes back, like I mentioned earlier, in the 70s, it was just full of it, as far as like Bigfoot and UFOs and things like that. It goes all the way back, even into the 50s. There were so many space shows. Buck
War of the
Rogers.
Worlds. I mean, when that happened,
Exactly.
people thought it was real.
Yep.
So I thought it'd be fun to have a segment where we just kind of talk about some of those things that we come across in both, current topics and even talking about like some of the things all the way back to the 50s where pop culture and the paranormal were kind of infused into one. I thought it'd be kind of fun.
Yes.
This week we're going to be looking at a new TV show called The Low Files. This segment will contain spoilers, so if you're planning on watching The Low Files unsoiled, please fast forward about 15 minutes so we don't ruin it for you, so you have been warned.
Don't blame us.
Now, we all know Rob Lowe from such movies as The Outsiders, St. Elmo's Fire, Wayne's World,
Yes.
and his work on The West Wing and Parks and Rec. Well, now he's moving into the reality TV realm in his new show, The Low Files, on A&E. As a boy, Rob loved spooky legends and scary mysteries. Sounds a lot like kind of our backgrounds as well.
Exactly.
And as a father, he shared that curiosity with his own young sons. They talk about these stories around the campfire, and they'd even go off on their own little Bigfoot hunts in the North Woods in Northern California. And they'd go around looking for Bigfoot and finding Bigfoot tracks and things like that. Well, now his sons are older. They're both in their 20s, both college students. And in this show, he is going out with his boys, exploring a different topic each week. The first thing that really struck me about this show is the theme music. They're using Blue Oyster Cult's "Don't Fear the Reaper."
How cool is that?
It is cool.
It makes me think of more. Is it the cowbells? Where there's
Exactly.
more
It is,
cowbell
more cowbell.
from the SNL skit.
I got
where
a
they-
prescription.
Right.
So Rob is kind of he's kind of an open-minded guy. He's not leaning one way or another on these things. He's just trying to figure it out. One of his sons, John Owen, he tends to be the very cynical one of the bunch. But by the end of the first episode, you could tell he can kind of be swayed by some of the things that happen to him. The other boy in the show is named Matthew, and he's I think he's more like Rob, just kind of is just taking it all in and just to see kind of what happens. But their first episode, they go to a place called Preston Castle, which is a boys' reformatory in Northern California, I believe.
That's already scary sounding, by the way.
It was a place
Totally.
built in like 1894. There were multiple murders that took place on the grounds there. Influenza claimed the lives of like half the staff and a third of the boys in the early days of the place. It's regarded as one of the most haunted places in California. So,
Yeah, I'm thinking Health and Human Services codes were a little bit different back
they
then.
were probably pretty lax.
Little loosey-goosey.
Yeah, loosey-goosey, and yeah, so in terms of punishment and what they did to boys who were out of line, I don't care who you are, you're gonna feel some funky energy if you walk into that building.
This is a legit 1800s. This is pre-child welfare laws and the kids cleaning chimneys back then. They
This
didn't
is
care.
back when you're like 3 years old, hand a kid a pitchfork. Hey, get to work,
Get
kid.
to work, you
Get to
lazy
digging.
kid.
So the show opens up. They're traveling in their car. They're talking about what they're going to do, and it was very reminiscent for me of a trip the three of us took.
Oh, yeah.
That we'll go into in much more detail, I'm sure, as the podcast goes on. But it's just kind of a father and his two sons having a good time. The guy's out on the road. It kind of revolves a lot around food. They're always talking about, let's stop for food. At one point they stop for donuts, like at 2 p.m, and it's kind of funny because the women come out of the woodwork. It's Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
He's wearing this tight kind of Under Armour type shirt, and they just get mobbed by these mothers and their daughters, and
Yes.
everybody wants selfies and autographs, and it just looks like they're having a lot of fun with it. But they they get back in their car and they drive to the place where this place is, and as they come into the town, you can see this place sitting up atop a hill.
Why is it always on a hill?
Why does it? Yeah, it's very ominous like that.
It's always on a hill.
You know, the sun's setting in the background, and it just reminded me of the Tower of Terror. That's exactly what this place looked like. So, and the guys, of course, get really excited about, you know, oh, we're going to be hanging out in this place.
Man,
so
I don't know.
So they go to their hotel, and it looks like it's must be a pretty small town, because the hotel didn't look like it's, you know, going to be a 5-star place, right? And you know, they meet up with a friend of theirs who is actually a shaman, and I'm thinking, well, they're bringing in a shaman. What's this guy going to look like, you know? And he's, you know, I'm thinking he's got some kind of fancy, weird headdress going on.
Exactly.
And this dude walks in, and it's just this normal-looking guy.
Yeah.
It's like in jeans and a t-shirt.
For a polo.
He's wearing like a, you know, one of those cowboy kind of, you know, coats that John Denver used to wear all the time.
Oh, that's amazing.
He's like, hey, I got my shaman degree online.
Yeah.
You know?
Don't squeeze the shaman, am I right?
Yeah.
sorry.
So
when he gets hugged. But bumps.
They sit down in the hotel, and they're talking about, you know, what they're going to do, and they, of course, break out all the equipment, and Rob Lowe has all the cool ghost hunting equipment, right?
Because he's Rob Lowe.
He is. He's got the money. He's got plenty of toys. There's an EMF, one of those electric magnetic field meters, and they're playing around with that. They've got something called an Ovulus, which is like a translator tool that they, apparently, as the spirits speak, it changes the frequencies to allow them to understand it in English, so they can hear them if they say something.
What?
They can hear the words.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, it's kind of a new gadget, man. It's like the equivalent of like the iPhone 7 of ghost hunting equipment.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I mean, because decades ago, you know, EVPs are probably being picked up on those big old clunky tape recorders. It's just funny how technology, you know, not only affects our everyday life, but even ghost hunting and looking for cryptids. Yeah.
So, and of course, they've got cameras up to wazoo, you know, infrared cameras, and
that's called a colonoscopy.
I was going to say.
When a camera's up your wazoo, yeah.
You may not find ghosts. Hopefully.
But Rob Lowe's
Scary,
running around the outside of the hotel the first night, him and the boys, and he's holding his. You can tell the footage they showed was him shooting with his cell phone, and he's holding it in portrait mode. And if you ever shoot video on your camera, always hold it sideways.
Sideways.
So you can fill the screen.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, now A&E has to go in and put these two kind of like
bars
on
bars.
either side of the screen.
Is that what they had to do?
Yeah, and so
it looked terrible. But what else are you gonna do? Because that's the evidence was gathered that way.
That's what he gave them. But they're running around, they're peeking in windows, and you know, thinking, what are we going to find? They apparently there was a well that some kid died in underneath the hotel. So they're out there looking for the well, and
one falls in. No.
Ultimately, it leads to, oh, let's peek in this window. What's in there? Oh, you know, maybe there's a ghost in there, right? So they kind of lift one of them up, and he looks in, and it's a kitchen, you know.
Oh.
But it's just kind of reminded me of the three of us out running around, you know, kind of the down moments of our trip, and you know, just out there having fun. And
right.
You could tell that's what it was about, was the guys out there having fun. So the next day they go and they set up in the haunted boys reformatory, you know, and they split up. Rob and one son go to the basement. The shaman and the other boy go up to the top of the place, and from there they break out all the gadgets. You know, they're setting up the equipment, and you start seeing like really weird things going on with the lighting, the EMF. There's one portion where one of the gadgets just stayed red. And they started talking to it, and it's like, can you make it another color? And almost on cue, this gadget changed to a different color, you know? It was just really kind of weird, some of the stuff that they were able to do.
Didn't they have a ball? Like, they had a ball set up?
That was the other group. They had a
Okay.
ball sitting on the floor, and all of a sudden it starts rolling across the floor. And the thing was flat. It wasn't even fully inflated. So you wouldn't think that vibrations could set it moving.
Yeah, not a deflated ball.
But it was just kind of cool how the night played out, and I won't go into too much detail about it. But one of the cool things that Rob did was sat down and he talked with the shaman about, he asked him, are some places more haunted than others, or is it easier to see the other side? In some places, why is it that in some places that you have more ghost sightings and other places you don't? And he kind of talked about it was Waka places. It goes back. It's a Quechuan word from the Quechuan languages of South America, and apparently it's almost like there's this veil between the two worlds, and in some places it's thinner than others. So in places like Sedona, Arizona, and places where you hear about some of these more strange happenings, they believe that this veil is thinner than others.
Right. So there's not quite as big of a buffer between our world and the spirit world, right?
Right.
It's just like pockets. It seems like almost like if you get into a certain range, for example, between Omaha and Fort Calhoun, if you're driving, there's always this one little spot where you will lose cell phone service every single time. Like it's almost just like the signal gets a little wonky at that point. So yeah, maybe like whether it's a reformatory or certain places, it's just like a local hotspot where the curtain gets kind of thin that separates the dimensions, and then you can kind of then you see apparitions or you have some paranormal activity.
Is that what he was kind of claiming? With this reformatory school was built near a waka?
Well, he I think he was kind of Rob was asking him some questions
in general,
and
I see.
But he may have alluded to that. This place could be. Actually, I think they did find that this place was built on like an ancient burial ground.
Why is that?
Why does it always have to be an Indian burial ground?
The question they asked.
Oh man.
So, but the show itself, it's shot like a lot of the other ghost shows you see. Everything's in infrared, so everything is green.
Yeah.
But it was a fun show, I think, and it just did remind me a lot of some of the experiences that we had together, just as a group of guys going out, having fun, and kind of exploring some of this stuff. But I recommend the show. I thought it was a lot of fun. And
what channel is it on again?
It's on A&E. They also show it on History Channel. I know on Cox you can call it up on demand. So if you have some free time, you're looking for something fun to watch, check out Rob Lowe and the Lowe Files.
You know what's funny is when I first caught wind of this, I think it was actually one of you sent me a text, but my first thought was, huh? Rob Lowe, I don't really associate that with the paranormal.
Right.
Like if you had said David Duchovny, and I said, oh yeah, X-Files, okay, well that makes sense, but I guess, for all we know, David Duchovny maybe is not into the paranormal.
Totally hates it, yeah,
and
exactly.
it was just his role in the X-Files.
Right.
But, yeah, I guess you never really know, what somebody's interests are outside of their acting roles. Like a lot of people, I bet, don't know that Jim Carrey is actually a really deep, kind of spiritual guy, despite the fact that he plays a lot of goofball roles. So,
right.
Yeah, and it kind of makes that clear on the Lowe Files that from a young age he's always been intrigued by this kind of stuff.
And one of the things that I liked about it was compared to some of the other ghost shows, it was light. There were moments of where the guys were just being silly, and just kind of lighten the mood. And some of these shows they go into the devil's going to scratch your back, and then, look,
right.
I've got scratches on my body, and they're just so intense. And so it was just kind of a fun show to watch. Rob Lowe himself kind of classified this show as Anthony Bourdain and Scooby-Doo. Put them in a blender, and you get the Lowe Files.
I love
it. So it was a fun show. So that's this week's Paranormal Pop Culture. We'll do it again next week.
Absolutely.
And now it's time for the main mystery.
Welcome to the main mystery, everyone. We're going to get down to the nitty-gritty.
We've had our appetizers, and now this is like the main course, right?
This is the main course. Sit down, tuck in.
Oh, but I'm already full.
You're not too full for the main mystery.
That always happens at dinner, right?
I know,
They bring
right?
out the chips and salsa, and then by the time your enchiladas arrive, you can't possibly eat another bite.
You're like, that's the classic Jim Gaffigan bit. Like, the appetizers are the food you get before your food.
Right.
So today's main mystery, we're going to be talking about the Lizard Man.
And the thing that comes to mind when I hear Lizard Man, I'm thinking creature from the Black Lagoon.
That's what I picture. Yeah,
That's what I
Merman from
picture.
He-Man.
I mean, that's probably my favorite Universal monster is Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah.
When I think of Lizard Man, I just think of myself in about January. You know, air's so dry, I get out of the shower. You know, we don't have a soft water filter, so I get out of the shower and I'm
You're a
like,
little scaly.
I'm just itchy. You know,
crusty.
I'm like a bear. I'm looking for a tree to scratch my back on, and it's like no amount of Johnson & Johnson can fix that,
Nothing.
man.
When I think of Lizard Man, I think of like the lounge lizard, like a guy in a big three-piece suit who's like, "Hey, everybody, welcome to the show."
Here we go inviting people into our brains.
I know, right?
No, this isn't going to end well.
But this is none of those things. It's not
No.
a scaly Andy.
It's not a scaly
It's not
me.
a cheesy lounge singer, nor is it the creature from the Black Lagoon.
But the thing that caught our attention was recently some agencies down in South Carolina have been tweeting about the eclipse, the upcoming eclipse on August 21st. And they've been talking about the eclipse has a tendency, or may not have a tendency, to increase activity of the Lizard Man, which has been a kind of a well-known legend creature known to people in South Carolina. And so that's kind of what brought our attention, that these state agencies have brought it upon themselves to actually send out warnings about, you may see more Bigfoot activity, or you may see more Lizard Man activity coming up during the eclipse. And, it's just kind of a silly thing I
Yeah.
think they're doing.
Yeah.
But it's like tongue-in-cheek.
But I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the Lizard Man and the history of the Lizard Man in that area. And just kind of dissect it and see if we can figure out what some of this might be.
When I read and listened to some of the eyewitness accounts of the Lizard Man and what was happening, like, to people and their property, it seemed almost very reminiscent of Bigfoot sightings in a lot of ways. And
a lot of the experts, have come out and said that they think this, rather than it being an actual like lizard that has morphed into a human somehow, they think it might have been like a Bigfoot that was out in the swamp. He comes up, he's wet. Maybe he's got some kind of a skin problem. I've heard that.
It's Bigfoot with eczema and a little bit of algae on him.
Exactly.
So maybe a little less fur, but a lot of what they are, a lot of his behavior can be traced back to what people describe Bigfoot as being.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny, I've watched these documentaries, pretty much every documentary that's ever been made on Sasquatch or UFOs, like, I'll watch it. Like, even if they're poor quality, I'll watch it just because in the hopes of learning something new. But yeah, it's funny, I've watched some documentaries that did not have Bigfoot in the title. They weren't using the term Bigfoot, and by the end of the show, you're like, oh, they're just talking about a Bigfoot. They're just calling it something else.
Yeah.
Like in parts of Missouri, they call it Momo, short for the Missouri Monster, or... they call them skunk apes in the South, and they call them, obviously Sasquatch in a lot of the Northwest and other places. But I think it's kind of funny in a way that in South Carolina they're saying that this upcoming eclipse might may or may not contribute to more sightings of the lizard man. It's kind of like when you watch those commercials of a new medication that's out, and they list every possible side effect, which takes like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the same thing.
Take that.
Yeah, I want to take that. Yeah, I'd rather just have the condition. But no, it's like the eclipse. Yeah, may or may not cause you to see Sasquatch, lizard man,
aliens, orbs,
ghosts, phantoms, you name it, just to cover all their bases.
Well, the thing about the Sasquatch by another name kind of thing, where I love the idea of them interviewing, and I have family in the South, so I can kind of poke fun a little bit, but I love the idea of interviewing a local who's seen it, and they've been like, this sounds a lot like a Bigfoot. No, that's dumb. That's stupid. Skunk ape? No, man, ain't no skunk ape. That's the lizard man. It's like they throw away everything but the local legend.
Right.
But there are some defining differences, right? I mean, people have said...
Well, they say the lizard man is generally described as being 7 feet tall, whereas Bigfoot can get up to 10 feet.
Right, yeah.
But he's bipedal, bulky, but they've also had reports of him being not so bulky. Covered in dark green, scaly, lizard-like skin. It's said to have had 3 toes on each foot and 3 fingers on each hand. They say he's incredibly strong. He likes to tear apart cars. That's one of the problems that they seem to have in this area, where people will come out of their houses and find their cars just trashed. Like metal ripped off the cars with like teeth marks in the cars.
It's more of a bicycle kind of guy.
A few witnesses have reported seeing a tail on this thing. Others say they haven't. But the legend of the lizard man began to really spread in like 1988, when Lee County Sheriff's Office was called to the scene of a strange instance of vehicle damage, where this couple came out in July of 1988, and they said, some animal attacked our car. And the car has got, like the chrome had been ripped off the bumper in several places, and they found like teeth marks in this car. And the deputies kind of taking a look at it, and they're like, hey, Sheriff, you better come down here and take a look at this. What could this thing be? And so, they were kind of relieved that the police didn't just dismiss this thing as just, typical vandalism, right away. They saw that, it had some aspects of being like chewed on, or an animal had attacked this thing.
It's like a rawhide. I mean, it wasn't just like 1 or 2 bites, like a dog tasted it and then, scampered off. It was like the whole thing was annihilated. Whatever it wasn't hurting the animal's mouth or gums.
This is a metal bumper though too. This is hardly like, this is something an alligator would be able to chew on and not get hurt. That's crazy.
Even like the sides of the car, and you're not going to probably see an alligator reaching the top of the car and scratching it on the top of the car. So, it had scratches, marks all over. The antenna was bent. Even some of the wires from the motor had been ripped out. And, some of these monster shows have gone back and examined, the evidence, the pictures that the police took, and tried to recreate some of this stuff. And they said, for an animal to be able to do that, it would have to have it was like 300 pounds of torque to be able to cause some of the damage that these guys had.
I mean, you're talking about like the pound per square inch bite force of, like a pit bull or an alligator or something like this. And it was...
so a lot of people are just dismissing, an animal altogether. Animals as we know it, like a bear, couldn't come in and cause some of the damage that they were having.
But they did conclude that it was some sort of animal.
Yeah, and the police were they took it seriously. They're like, we're not just going to dismiss this. We're going to reach out to the public, and if anybody out in the public has seen, I guess back up a little bit. Some of the people who came and witnessed the police there and saw all the commotion. They're like, well, maybe it was the lizard man. And the police are like, what? And, so apparently strange things have gone on years previous in that area. And, the locals kind of chalk it up to the lizard man, what they call the lizard man. So, rather than dismiss it, the police said, well, if anybody knows anything, come in. I want to talk to you. No one's in trouble. But, we're just trying to get to the bottom of this. Because they're thinking, if there is something out there that can cause this damage, we want to get to the bottom of this mystery.
Is there any blood or anything left behind from this thing ever?
In one instance, they did find some blood on the car and like saliva and things. But they've done like DNA testing. I believe some of the DNA testing came back, and it closely resembled that of like an orangutan, or some kind of a primate, which is really kind of weird.
Ain't no primates in South Carolina.
Yeah,
comes back to the
and that comes back to kind of the Bigfoot thing,
right?
Right.
But
or maybe some of the werewolves migrated southeast from Wisconsin,
right,
and got a taste for Chevys.
They wanted some fried pork rinds.
That's
in
right.
South Carolina.
And there have been other instances where it came back as a canine, and they're like, no dog did this, but they, some the people who it came back as a canine, they're like, well, we took the car over to our friend's house. They've got a farm a few miles over, and to show it to them, and they said their dogs were all over it. So it could be a case of contamination.
That's what I'm thinking, man. It's so hard to get every time there's DNA evidence, it's always contaminated.
Yeah,
it's always.
The technology is improving, so with each passing decade, they'll probably be able to pull more accurate DNA from smaller and smaller samples. But yeah, you're right. It usually is inconclusive, but. Lizard man, it's one of those strange, subcategories in the crypto world. It doesn't pull as many headlines as Loch Ness or Bigfoot, but I kind of like the lesser-known ones because when there's multiple sightings, it makes you wonder what the heck is going on. Like many of these people, it's not like they want credit. Their reputation's actually damaged by coming out and claiming that they've seen some reptilian walking around, but... Right. Just to get to the bottom of it, though, you know what I mean?
When you're describing the bumper and antenna, the roof of the car, the hood, there's not a dog that's going to be climbing all over the car like that. That doesn't make any sense.
And it was after that first initial, the police report that was filed, and then the police reached out to the public to come in, if you know anything, that a father brought his 17-year-old son in. And that's probably the most, the thing that really gave wheels to the legend of the lizard man. It was the story of 17-year-old Christopher Davis. And his father brought him into the police and said, my son has a story that he has to tell you.
Oh, boy.
And so Christopher was a good kid, worked at McDonald's, coming home late one night from work, and he was driving by the swamp, and his tire blows, okay? So he's got to get out, and he's fixing the tire. Well, he changes the tire, he's putting the jack back in the back of the car, and in the moonlight, he can see something approaching him. And he didn't exactly know what it was, if it was an animal, but it was coming at him at a pretty good rate of speed, and it spooked him. So he jumps in his car, and then what he described as a lizard man slams up against the side of the car, trying to open the car door. Was pounding on the car. Christopher takes off in the car, and this thing is on the top of the car, just like hanging on. So he's swerving side to side.
Oh my God.
Trying to get this thing off, and so of course the police, they question this kid up and down, and they believe him. They think he was a credible witness. Something happened to him.
His car was jacked up.
His car was jacked up.
When I first read this story and I read the part about it, he hopped in the car and drove away. I had to reread it because I initially thought they were talking about the lizard man. Like he stole the guy's car. I'm like, I almost tossed the paper. I was like, Grand Theft Auto for lizards.
Shows you, yes.
And then I backtracked and I said, okay, Christopher drove off. Okay, I got you.
But he's been questioned numerous times by many different people, and you got to kind of give credit to the sheriff that he didn't just dismiss it. If he's got something in his county, and that's what the sheriff has come out and said, if he's got something in his county that people are reporting are attacking people, he's got to get to the bottom of this, because if something happens, it was on his watch, and he's going to have to leave the state. He's not going to be. People aren't going to trust him anymore. So he's got to investigate this thing.
Well, and you'd have to, because even if it's just a total hoax, and if it's a guy in a lizard costume, well, he's still harassing people, so you still got to track down and get evidence and try to bring it to a stop, right?
That's some next level pranking, though. You're on the hood of someone's cars, they're driving off with you on it. You're like, that's gone too far. It's
gone too far. Almost like the guy who walks around in a Sasquatch outfit and gets shot in the butt. You know what I mean? It goes too far.
Yeah. But within weeks, the story really gained traction, and just NBC Nightly News, ABC, Dan Rather, everybody was covering this thing. Good Morning America did a live broadcast from Skateboard Swamp, which is where the sighting took place. Time Magazine, newspapers, everybody. They were giving news reports as far away as Korea were covering this story. So, and unfortunately, it sounds like Christopher kind of took the brunt of it. People kind of shunned him, and it sounds like he's had kind of a hard life ever since this whole thing happened. He came out about it, but he's always stuck to the story that this is what happened. This happened to me, and
what a deal.
It's unfortunate because everything is a myth until it's not. You know what I mean? Like once upon a time, people thought that mountain gorillas were nothing but a myth, and once upon a time, all the creatures on Earth were unknowns or relative unknowns, and then, once they're discovered, and there's new sightings and new discoveries all the time, even as recently as, I think it was right around 2010 maybe, there was a new species of monkey discovered called the snub-nosed monkey. It was like the size of a house cat or a raccoon.
Yeah.
They're just now classifying this thing as a legit species, and I'm sure the people who initially reported seeing those things were, also labeled as liars and nutcases, and
just dismissed as some, it was probably a different kind.
Right, yeah.
We, I lost my train of thought. No, I had it right there, and now it's gone.
Lizard Man's getting in your head.
He's in my head. No, I remember now. I read an article once where lions, this is way back when, but lions, which are only native to one part of the world, I believe it's only in Africa, and people in Europe had never seen a lion up until a certain time period. And so when the scarce few people that had actually seen a lion came back and just kind of visually described it, they look at the early pictures of lions, they look like they have people faces. You know what I mean? You ever seen those drawings of lions and they have those, and that was the best rendition they could come up with. And had you never seen that, you'd have been like, that's not real, man. That's something you made up. Look at that. Monster. It's not even real. And then, lions are real. Surprise. # lions are real. So I agree. There's animals out there all the time that people have just kind of very hubrisly nothing real. Doesn't exist.
Apparently, a lot of the sightings kind of trailed off. There were a few sightings in the months right after Christopher made his report in 1988, and then for a few years after that, there were some sightings, and they kind of trailed off. And there have been some more recent sightings, like in the 2000s. I think 2011 there were a couple, and these again are instances where vehicles are being damaged by some type of creature, or something's trashing cars. And it's kind of funny because there were two different instances, one in like 2011, another in 2015, and they were both Dodge vans. So apparently these things don't like Dodge vans.
I was going to say, I'm a Ford guy, and you know it.
Let's see one more Dodge fan.
I'm going to bite its bumper.
This here's a Chevy town. So,
shaking the antenna as it drives away.
but a lot of the investigating that some of the experts have done. There's actually a guy who wrote a book about this, guy by the name of Lyle Blackburn, and he's pretty well known in the cryptoid community. I think he was actually a speaker at the first annual Nebraska Bigfoot conference that just took place.
Oh, we missed
back
it.
in February.
Next
We had talked about going to that.
We were going to go.
We just couldn't make the schedule.
Yeah, just
work.
all three of us had stuff going on that weekend. We'll be there next year.
But he
Heck
was
yeah.
like one of the speakers at this thing. But he actually wrote a book about the lizard man. That's where I got a lot of my information. So if you want to read up more about the lizard man, he's got all kinds of. He was given full access to all the police reports, all the photos of the police. He worked with the sheriff. They were very open to letting him go through their files and write his book. And so I believe it's lyleblackburn.com is his website, or you could go to Amazon. He's got it out there, but check it out. It looks like it'd be a pretty interesting book.
What a crazy... That's amazing.
Lizard man. Yeah. And even for people who, are kind of into this kind of thing, it's such a lesser known, specialty cryptid that some people probably never even heard of it.
Oh, man. Lizard man, doing whatever a lizard can. I picture if you tried to grab him, if he had a tail, it like breaks off, and you're like, no. Have a little wiggly
Kind of like a newt or something.
Exactly.
Lizards that do that.
Those yard lizards in Florida.
I just keep thinking of the Florida Gators, the sports, the
team,
the
sports ball.
university. Yeah. Their mascot is just a big gator that walks around. That's kind of what I'm picturing.
It's wearing a sweater.
It is. Oh yeah, total varsity sweater, but it's kind of comical until you see one out in the wild that's not fake.
Exactly. Jumping on your hood.
That's right.
But I guess the point I was making was these later sightings. They believe it was more like a Bigfoot sighting than an alien or reptile type person walking around the swamps of South Carolina. But I don't know. Could.
Very interesting.
I just picture this alternate dimension or this alternate reality where there's like a waiting room.
Yeah.
And you got Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Lizard Man, Chupacabras, all these cryptids, and they're just kind of hanging out, and they, taking turns rotating through the door and entering our dimension. And Bigfoot looks at the clock, and he's like, well, gents, my turn. I got to make an appearance in Oregon, and then one down in Texas, and then you're on the clock, Loch Ness. They just take turns popping in.
It's Monsters, Inc.
Basically.
It's exactly Monsters,
through that magical door.
They're like, time to go.
Yeah, I tell you what, man.
Bunch of clock.
Bunch of clock.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's an HR department.
Working
and everything.
stiffs.
Yeah. Well, as dads, I mean, we all, we collectively have 3, 4, 5, 6 kids all together. Not the three of us. That'd be a different type of podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, all together we have 6 kids, and my daughter, she's just now 3, and man, she bit me last week. She probably could have done some damage on a Dodge van. You probably still see the remnants right there.
Oh,
she bit me hard.
wow.
Not on purpose. She was just goofing around, getting excited. She bit me, chomped me right on the shoulder, and I squealed like a pig. But man, yeah, when she was a little one, she had those little sharp little teeth, almost like puppy teeth.
Those
How they're
kid teeth.
extra sharp.
Well, those puppy teeth they'll take your finger off.
Oh, they will. They will.
Where
Yeah.
my kids are past the biting stage, thank goodness. And you relate it to kids, and like one of my kids is driving now, and if I had, she comes back home with a story like that, I'm gonna be like, first of all, like, your car, we just bought it. But still, it's just, it's terrifying, especially as if you're not worried enough with your kid driving. You're like, I got to worry about Lizard Man too on top of it.
I just picture it. You walk up and she's taking out a mailbox. What happened? Oh, Lizard Man. Yeah, totally. Distracted me and I hit the mailbox.
That's what I'd be really afraid of. Passes around the corner, he'll have a driver pretty soon.
Yikes.
I know. I already do. She's passed the test and everything. She just has to wait till she's 16.
Oh boy.
crazy, but
Kids driving, that is the scariest
That
part
That's truly the monster.
of scarier than Lizard Man. We hope we eased you into it gently.
Yes.
Like slinking into a hot tub. So now you know what to expect next time.
and we'll try to come up with some more ideas of maybe some fun stuff we can do with the podcast and also our social media sites, which I may or may not have been established quite yet.
We have one so
have
far,
one.
so.
And if people have suggestions of topics for future shows, you can always shoot those our way.
Yes.
If you know of a lesser known cryptid or a story or recent sightings that you want to suggest we talk about, just send those to us at any time.
Please do. We're on Gmail at paranormaldads@gmail.com, and we also have our Facebook page. You can find us by looking for Paranormal Dads. We're right there. We're the only ones.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.